Part of the reason to sell a new copy.
10-4, 10-4. Come in, room.
Richard Seth-Martins.
Hi, how are you? Very nice to see you. How are you?
Fine. So you look around here and you imagine
That.
us standing here?
Well, I've imagined it for a long time. It's just that we're bringing it out into the open today.
Which part will begin?
This part will be the area that begins first. Then we move and start excavation and construction over here. And then the museum, which is here.
What's the time frame? In years?
7 years we've been working, and we're halfway there.
A major chunk of your life, isn't it?
God, you better believe it.
This is really a very special day for us at the Trust. It's a major milestone in the development of the center. It all began, in a sense, back in 1982, when the Board of Trustees approved a plan for the future of the Getty, which included the development of a number of operating programs, an enhancement of the museum, and a decision that these programs should all ultimately come together on one site.
It is a city famous for earthquakes, mudslides, and movie stars, but now Los Angeles can boast of a cultural achievement. It's a world-class art museum.
You're looking at a model of the new Getty Center, the complex consisting of 6 buildings. The Getty Center will be nearly, listen to this, 1 million square feet in size.
The project is the most ambitious in the arts and academia world today, and a boon to Los Angeles.
The heavily landscaped grounds with a panoramic view of Los Angeles will feature a cafe and restaurant, a 450-seat auditorium, a research and education center, and 5 gallery pavilions.
It is going to be extraordinary. There is nothing like this in the world, is there?
Not really. So the Getty is a very complex and interesting organization now, not a museum any longer.
And from the day it opens, it is expected to draw more visitors than any other place in Los Angeles.
The best scenario of significance of the Getty project is that it's going to give Los Angeles its Acropolis.
Now, I don't want anyone to say after the building is completed, what have you done to this wonderful site? Because it always looks best in this state.
We're right there. Which way are we looking?
Yeah, we're standing right, that tree is really right about there. This is the height.
We see the famous red line there.
We're inside the red line.
This is roughly 26 acres within this area here. This total property here is 105 acres. We added 13 here, and then this is a 57-acre parcel.
Which neighbors are the most concerned?
It's this group right down in this pocket here.
This is the splinter group.
This is the splinter group. They were represented. They're part of the group that we negotiated with throughout the conditional use permit, but they claim that their own particular little neighborhood interests weren't adequately represented in that process. And so now they've come out again, and they're demanding that we make certain concessions about the visibility of the structures at this point.
The Getty Press project is an enormous and complex undertaking. So far, there's been very little information. The first time we could see the model was 3 weeks ago, and look at any plans which are a little vague. There's been a mammoth change in concept today from what was understood a year ago. We, who will have our lives changed and must adopt to the enormity of this project, request 60 days to study these new proposals now being set forth by Getty.
I'm concerned that we may be facing a strategy that might be characterized as bait and switch. That is to say, where we're presented with one product and we're delivered another.
We have here, from what I've seen, the tip of an iceberg. Less than 1/3 of the Getty building is displayed on this model. How can we evaluate a project that we cannot see that is hidden?
Don't give me the rhetoric, just tell me what you want. We'll move so much quicker.
Okay, and in connection with that, we need the sizes of these buildings. We saw the little sketch that they gave you. I've detailed in my letter why those sizes do not answer the problem because there are too many ambiguities and generalities.
All right, you want to know what's under the ground, how big it is. Okay. I got to move on.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we'll put this matter over till June 11th. Thank you for your patience. We'll take a 5-minute recess.
When I was hired, we had a process that had been started to get permission to change the zoning. And that's why the conditional use permit was an important part of the process, because the site had been zoned residential. So we were given a map that city planning department had on file, a topographic map of the site that of the area on the top of the hill. And on that print, there was a line drawn in red pencil. And it was following a contour line. Since the site has hills and valleys, this was a contour at about 750 feet above sea level. And we were told that this is your site, but that's the area in which you can build. This was one of 107 conditions of things we could not do.
Well, I knew the site would be problematic. It would be a challenge, but it would enable us to create an environment that would be a special attraction to the public. This is a seduction process. Most people are not art aficionados. Majority of them have had very little, if any, art education. The magic of this place, as we saw it, was that it would provide an ambiance in which they would be more receptive to what they see and experience in the art.
I think the most limiting factor that we have to face is this whole height limit. And I think what's terribly important is to have this variation of height to break down the scale. Because otherwise you have no ability to break the scale of the building down. And this is where I disagree with a conditional use permit. I would like to see more variation in height
for a tower or something.
Than we're permitted. I think that's a terrible limitation.
Practically forced by the conditional use permit to adopt an aesthetic which is not what we expect of Richard, because it specifically states that the materials must blend with the landscape. So he's got a very strong. Well, they're not thinking of white porcelain enamel.
How do you deal with that? Is there any?
No way.
No way.
I think that we have to, I think this is going to be the fight.
This is the commencement of the afternoon session of the City Planning Commission's hearing. This is a conditional use permit plan approval requested by the J. Paul Getty Trust. And Mr. Snow, would you like to begin?
I am addressing you today on behalf of the Brentwood Homeowners Association, and as I'm sure you've been pleased to hear, as of about 7 o'clock last night, we did enter into a signed agreement with the Getty Art Center, and I believe you...
None too soon, Hugh.
We always wait till the last moment, as you know.
Yes.
As you probably see, we have about 3 pages of agreements, and we believe that those agreements will provide protection for the residential community and substantially reduce the detrimental impact upon the community. And because of that, we're here today to give conditional, if you will, approval and agreement with the plans as submitted.
Thank you all very much for your patience and cooperation. So we'll take a 5-minute recess.
I think it's going to be a great thing.
I'm glad you worked
worked it all out very nicely.
Yeah, it took a little bit of
Always takes
time. My blood on the floor, but
You expected anything different?
No.
Congratulations.
And here's to a wonderful design.
Well, we're just hemmed in a little bit more, but fighting for inches. You look at that site, 20 feet, 50 feet, doesn't make any difference. We're fighting for inches of height.
Is that why you always added 5 feet to everything I wanted
That's
to do?
right. It's not perceptible.
There was the desire on the part of some of the residential neighbors not to see a building on the hill. And therefore they said, okay, if you're going to build there, build it in a way that we can't see it. Well, that's not so easy. But the Getty, I think, was sensitive to the concerns of the neighbors, and they too wanted a building that would, in a sense, blend in with the landscape. And when I was chosen and explained that, we want a Richard Meyer building, but we don't want it to be white, I thought, this is terrific. It's going to be wonderful. Because I don't know what it's going to be, but it will be a challenge to think about that place in a way that is quite different from Frankfurt or New Harmony or many other buildings which I've designed. From the very beginning, when we visited a number of museums which I had designed prior to my selection, it was very clear that John Walsh, the director of the museum, wanted a more traditional approach to the design of the gallery spaces than existed in the High Museum in Atlanta or the Des Moines Arts Center or the Museum for Kunsthandwerk in Frankfurt. These museum galleries are not rooms, they're not defined spaces, they're interconnected spaces bathed in natural light.
This will be one of the most interesting things about the project. We will be searching for a decor for these collections that both belongs to the collections in terms of its historical and aesthetic sense, but has architectural logic. In other words, within a modernist building, a decor that does its job for the collections, and at the same time, it is not just some kind of tacked-on stage decor. The great creativity is going to be involved in that.
The Getty collection is this pretty specialized thing. It's almost entirely European art. The largest part of it is paintings from about late Middle Ages until about 1900. Another large part is French furniture and decorative arts, ranging from the late 17th century until the early 19th century. The biggest task we've got, and the architect has got, is to show the works of art in as beautiful and logical a way as possible, in a setting that really enhances them. And this is older art, so there are some ways to do that and ways not to do it. Older paintings cannot hang on white walls or even very light walls successfully. They can't hang successfully on hard, uniform surfaces. They need some texture to support them. And the most important single thing is good light. And the best way to do that is with daylight. And I know how to do that. And I am a very discerning consumer of architecture and a pretty sharp critic of what works and what doesn't in museums.
Trying to organize the program for the Getty Center, what was necessary for us was to find what are some of the defining features of the site. What are some of the givens besides that red line, which is our building envelope?
One the strongest elements in this location and throughout Los Angeles, of course, is the freeway. We have the San Diego freeway, this powerful element running north-south. And there was a ridge which paralleled the freeway and another one which paralleled the freeway to the north. And these vectors of topography, these vectors, it seemed to me, of natural form of the earth were the beginning of thinking about the site and the buildings, that somehow the buildings should rise out of the ridges that were there. And so the museum sector took its location here on the ridge, on the city side, the downtown side, the UCLA side, the freeway side. And the library, the Center for the History of Art, took its vector, as it were, from the ridge on the private side. And it's like two arms reaching out, creating a space in between them. And it seemed to me that in between these two major portions of the Getty Center should be a garden that belonged to the museum and a garden that belongs to the Center for the History of Art, to the scholars. And so that seemed, in a sense, to grow out of the earth, out of the topography, out of the place, and also be related to the city of Los Angeles.
They're arranged by type of material. The granite is against this wall here. The slate and dolomites and sandstone and marble are along this wall.
The exterior materials of the buildings were an issue from the day I was hired as architect. This is very LA. Someone, upon hearing that I was chosen as architect, said that it can't be white and it can't be porcelain enamel. Written into the conditional use permit was that the buildings must be predominantly stone.
Keep this. Keep this. The ones in front of the box might be
All right. We need a bigger table. I mean, this is terrific, but you don't want too much of this. So I think what we do is we put together, 3 or 4 different palettes. It shows the range, the kind of stone, and relationship of colors and a differentiation.
So there might be 3 or 4 of these sets.
4, at least 4.
You want to see the rest of the reds up front?
Let's look at
the others are sort of brighter.
Let's look at it. I know we're obligated to do it. Look at them.
It's a brand new palette.
When it was written into law that the buildings couldn't be white, I took this as an opportunity to think about what is appropriate to this place and not how does it differ from my previous work, but how does it incorporate ideas that I have about architecture and the making of space and articulate them in a slightly different fashion to accommodate to some rather whimsical, it seemed to me, attitudes about what color meant in architecture. Because for me, the whiteness of the buildings was the clearest expression of all the colors that are around it and the clearest expression of the architectural form and the relationship of what is built, what is man-made, to what is natural. What's natural is always changing, which actually in this photograph of a house constructed on Lake Michigan talks about what is natural and what is man-made. The whiteness articulates that difference and that contrast. It also articulates the openness of the house and the way in which the color of the building actually changes. In this photograph, it's all blue. It is blue. It looks blue. The blueness of that late light, which is so extraordinary, is reflected in the whiteness of the building. So for me, the whiteness is all color. It's the abundance of color. It's not the absence of color. When the Getty Selection Committee chose me as architect for the project, I'm sure they understood this. They understood the desire for a certain purity, a certain simplicity, a certain clarity in my architecture, and I'm sure appreciated that. They wanted that, but they also, I think, wanted it in a different way without knowing what that was.
I think that's a good selection if we can get it that small.
Well, why not? Give me some tracing paper. These people coming in, we have people standing to wait to see someone. Why not keep this location and design this thing to be of a size that it can accommodate that number of people? Look, here. Do something like that here, so that it does work all the way around. That's what it should be.
Yeah, let's see what.
Let's just see what's changed.
Just the intermediate. Photo archive.
The thing which doesn't work very well at the moment is this lobby.
Is this going to be very light on this side, and then if it were, it would put this side into make it weak, as it were. I think
it comes this way.
Yes, this ought to be in a
noise.
sense the darker side, so that you get the sense that towards the areas you move with and along the light and towards the light.
Kurt Forster always loved these kind of double metaphors, so that the building was always a monastery, but it was also the monastery that was open to the light, to air, to debate, to the public.
It just seems to me that these are fairly special.
Yeah, potentially they could be given a more distinctive shape.
Maybe if these were just more of objects.
I like that.
We did not have a very clear program when Richard had to evolve this design. What we had were a series of parts of the center. We had a photo archive, we had an archive, we had rare books, and then we had a massive number of books in the stacks themselves. What happens if you switch them and you make this rare book, this archive? Because rare book, you know, that idea that you would go to the protected, distant place. For rare book, the process was, for me, how did you take something so abstract, which was about qualities, and create a building that could embrace some of those ideas in terms of its own kind of symbolic form. And of course, a spiral became a kind of wonderful metaphor for a center which was dynamic, which was in movement, in which ideas originating at the base seemed to resonate out and upward. The spiral became a dynamic metaphor for uniting all of the parts with a big, gigantic path.
I think that's beginning to work.
I think that's much better than this side-by-side.
Yeah, the side-by-side thing this didn't mean much.
Progress.
Or change.
Come over tomorrow, we'll finish up.
Yes.
I'd like to welcome everyone, and I'm very pleased that everyone could come today because it's a kind of interim, not a completed final presentation, but it's still work in progress. The museum is a complex within itself, but it also relates to the central gardens, which become an important outdoor visitor space. And the way in which the center is organized, it too opens to the gardens, so that we've always talked about the central gardens as being an important part of the museum experience as well as the experience of living and working on the site. And the nature of the gardens, which here we see without trees in that early model, which is over at the trust office. With the trees, it takes on obviously a very different feeling. But this area becomes a kind of terraced garden area with water, and the water kind of steps down and will spill down from one level to another. This darker wood is meant to indicate water. So maybe this is a time, we've been talking about the use of stone and the use of materials for a long time, and we felt it was about time to try to look at that. What we've decided was that we have the three palettes of the red, brown, the gray, and the green. And different aspects of the project will have predominantly either the green palette or the gray palette, and a combination of the earth stones with it. And this is really our first attempt to look at, what that might mean.
I like the earth stones that blend with the earth and the foundation.
Yeah.
But then I am really nervous about the use of them higher up.
It's not saying this is what it is. It's really a first attempt to say, how do you use many different stones in a combination?
It's busy.
Well, it is busy. It is.
And I'm going to say something absolutely heretical. I still love white, and I still love white.
Well,
I don't think that should be as tightly ruled out as it has been.
well, that's.
Just pretend I didn't say it if it was
Well, I think what Louise is doing is something I feel right now it lacks clarity. It's just busy, confusing, and it's just at a point of awkwardness. And sure, you're going to pull it out of that, but I think it needs to be said.
I know that materials are absolutely integral to Richard's style. I heard the Getty people more or less saying the leopard can change his spots. I know the leopard cannot, and I know he shouldn't. But I also know that he is quite capable of working in stone as well as metal. But I know that he is going to draw the line if he thinks it's the wrong material to express the wrong kind of structure or the wrong kind of function. He will use metal some places, stone other places, where in terms of his structural and design aesthetic, it's appropriate.
This is P1 level here, and we're going down to P7, so you have 70 total feet. But by the time you include all of the excavations for the footing, we'll be down in the proximity of 80 feet. Conditional use permit doesn't allow us to export or import material on this job. So everything that we excavate, we have to leave right on site. So that means every spoonful of dirt that you take out of one area, you've got to find a home for it to place it in another area. And that's pretty complex on a job of this magnitude.
Meanwhile, the elves have been tapping in the workshop.
Oh, well, that's someone else's thing, right?
I'm assuming the light is perfect. Okay. I'm just walking in to try to see what this room is going to be like architecturally, what it's going to feel like. You're seeing an artificial case here where there are no exhibition walls built.
That's right.
We can build walls up to here and to here.
Well, you don't have to build them up. In fact, it's better if the walls don't go to the ceiling. Better in terms of lighting. Why do you have to take the wall to the beam?
To make these spaces feel more like rooms rather than free-floating kind of divisions of a large general space. Imagine a deep purple Bokhara
rug. Yeah, fine. Well, that'd be beautiful.
But what you've done is give us white walls, which is a condition which will never exist.
Well, so that's you may find it once or twice.
Thank you. So it would be, I don't know what
what to pick as a middle tone, but I mean, you know, pick something that pleases you that isn't, you know, the sort of middle value.
It looks best this way. Try to give it its best appearance, and then anything else is downhill, right? I like the work of art to be perceived clearly, and the whiteness of many spaces helps. I want to see, you know, the soft pastels in the Turners. And I think I can see them better on a surface that is not similar to the pastels within the painting.
I love the white walls, John.
All he can talk about is the white walls under there.
Do they make white damask?
Yeah.
Huh? White damask. From the very first day with Richard Meyer, I said to him, you know, I love your buildings. I'd love to live in one of your houses, and I've seen your museums. I have to tell you, we've got older art and nothing but. We're not going to hang it in a building with white walls and clear glass windows. That's not possible. How would you be able to travel the distance between what you've been doing and what we'd need done in terms of materials and approach? And he said, yeah, I think so. That was point 1 of 87.
Good.
Next point, we go on thinking that the information desk really wants to be in the center of things. I know you hate it.
God, it's so static.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I mean, it's the worst place for it.
Well,
I mean, I think if you just look at this, but if you look at this in relation to the gardens, the outside, and everything else, it's totally wrong.
Let's think about it some more. If we have a new, stronger, better idea, or we're really come away absolutely dead sure we want it there, we'll tell you so. Now, the big thing that happened here is that a cabinet gallery got moved because of the change. Remember the change on the upstairs here? Got moved to a place where it is not helpful to us.
Where do you want it?
Well, if you reconfigure downstairs to eliminate that foyer and consolidate that former foyer space with the info, why not give us a cabinet gallery here?
Well, it's not room.
Well, you said that awfully fast.
No, it's this big.
You'd have to change the way you entered here, wouldn't you?
Right.
A little bit.
And below, too.
We tried it in our ham-handed,
it doesn't work, though.
amateurish, presumptuous fashion.
No, John, what you're doing, you forgot. By doing this, you remember that whole thing about visibility of this entry?
Yeah.
Which we spent so much time on years ago.
Yeah.
And that whole reason for kind of changing this around was to make that entry visible from the courtyard and from the lobby and everything else. Now you've made it invisible again.
Well, Whitman said, do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes.
Here are two people. They're very strong-minded. All right, they're going to have to accommodate each other. I think if you leave a museum completely to an architect, it's a very risky thing. The art almost inevitably suffers, although you'll have a beautiful building. If you leave it completely to a museum director, it's almost worse because you don't even have a beautiful building to walk into. You usually have a characterless building, and the art still suffers. So that I think if you have a really first-rate architect and a really first-rate museum director who is aesthete as well as scholar, who is as visual as he is informed as a historian, you are going to have a bumpy process that everything's a gamble, but this should turn out to be a superb building.
It's supposed to line it up with those things. That's less important than it works within the space.
The other thing is I'd like this to come out to this facade. No?
Those things are a little bit blue.
Because it really should pick up that plane.
Yeah.
It'd be basically the same design, but these are the things you see in the model.
This is a tough building. Well, it has a complexity to it that the others don't have.
It does.
I'm looking at a number of different things in terms of materials now, Harold, because
Obviously, with this building, curved stone would be out of the question. It's just far too expensive.
So if I'm looking at a panel material, and not white porcelain enamel, but either aluminum, cast aluminum, or some kind of cast modular material that you could cast any shape to, and it would cost the same as if you, as though you were making it as a flat panel. And I think this building in particular lends itself to it.
Talk about the aluminum for a minute. I mean,
Well,
the
there's
kind
two
of
things.
initial reaction that people have is, whoa, you know.
Well, when you get into curved stone,
No, I know that.
we're out of the ballpark in terms of cost.
And you don't, what you don't have here is any aluminum panels, I mean, colored aluminum panels.
No.
And you don't see using
No,
that? No. You've shifted away from such a wide range of colors in the stone to just one color of stone.
Yeah, we're now moving towards this sort of range of stone, in this range of colors.
How long before it comes down?
Oh, we'll come down. Here,
Watch out, there it goes.
Here we go. Hey, baby.
Allora, mi dispiace, avevo attaccato lo striscione con scritto auguri Laura, non ho letto niente.
You don't see that very often.
No, not even in Beverly Hills. Where everything happened except this.
Was that a good break?
The bottom part is fantastic. We are quite satisfied. Good. You know, every day is chance.
I think you need a bigger pillow. The pillow looks a little...
We can afford that.
Mr. Marianti is one of the major suppliers to the United States for travertine. And when Richard decided he wanted this rough, irregular, variable kind of finish, the cleft finish, his people came here and began to work with Marianti to come up with a device, this guillotine device, that would somehow produce it in a dependable, organized way.
You know, we need a lot of stone that's consistent, and travertine is one of those materials. Also, it's a warm tone, but it's a light tone. It's not white. No one wants white, like my shirt. But it has a certain whiteness about it in the sunlight, which I think is good. These are incredible.
Now, for me, it always has seemed, and still seems, that the honed is more consistent with your architecture. Because it's so clear and even.
Yeah, I agree with Steve. It's much more your palette, really, than the cleft. Your traditional.
Yeah. Well, we want to do something different. But also, you have this against the other materials. You see, because then you have the smooth metal panel on part and the rough stone. I mean, look at the richness of that.
Well, that's you need a sprinkler system to keep it wet all the time.
Keep it wet. I want materials that are going to express the intention of the buildings. The buildings now are some stone and some metal panel, although not white. We had hoped to make them brushed stainless steel, sandblasted stainless steel. Upon hearing that it was going to be metal, or even seeing the metal sample, not seeing it, but just the idea of metal, metallic finish, worried some of the community. Although it's not perceptively any different from any other material from more than 100 yards away, it's the idea that there was in their head, oh my goodness, a metal building up there on the site. And so I've had to fight for what I believe in. Whether I win or not is another matter, and we'll see how it turns out, hopefully soon. But this has been ongoing for a long period of time, and it's still not resolved because, one, I'm not about to say, you choose the material and I'll make it that way, and they're not about to give them.
So we're going to be putting a complete schedule report under this scenario.
Under this scenario. Then this would become the basis for producing the overall project summary.
We're getting ready to pour concrete on the top of the hill. It's just a tremendous milestone. Many people didn't think it was going to happen. We committed to it several months ago, and we've fought and we've scratched and we've clawed and we found, ways to get portions of drawings approved. We know there's changes, we know there's design adjustments being made, and yet we've got to pour some concrete. We've got to put a foundation upon which we can step to begin the building process.
One aspect of this project which is unique, at least for me, is that we're building it while we're still finishing drawing it. This fast-track process enables the project to be completed sooner than if we had finished all the drawings and then begun construction.
It's been the most extremely difficult job that any of us have ever encountered. One road up, one road down. I don't think anybody understood the complexity of building on top of a mountain. I don't think the architects knew, the owners didn't know, the contractor, the subcontractors, nobody knew the complexity of this project. It's like constructing a building on top of a pinhead.
Clearing off that footing that we got, everything's turning out good, Gene.
Okay, that's on that step footing coming down?
Yeah, I can't work.
Isn't this can you believe this? It's the biggest goddamn model I've ever seen in my life. The next larger scale is the entire building in wood, right? You know that the scheme calls for a string of museum buildings around the garden. The principle here is that we wanted galleries in buildings that weren't too big. We wanted each of these buildings to be manageable. We wanted it easy, in other words, for people to tackle a piece of the collection. We wanted them to do something in between looking at works of art, refresh their eyes, relax, sit down, have a cup of coffee, listen to the fountain. Because we all think that's part of making a happy museum experience for a great many people. There came a point a year ago when I thought about going to someplace else and starting again in another museum. And it was tempting in a lot of ways because it was a very sort of an exciting proposition. But I had to weigh that against sticking it out here and actually getting this thing built. I found that very hard to imagine, actually walking away and letting somebody else come in and screw it up. I'm like Richard, I want to see it through to the finish and make sure that it really does what we spent all this time and sweat on. What I don't really get here is this. There would be a picture rail, and it makes a kind of stripe around the room, in which the pictures hang. It's also something from which you hang pictures. It's a structural thing, but not structural relation to the wall, just structural because it has to hold some weight. And in the picture galleries of the past, it was absolutely normal that this height be, functional, more a matter of decor, in other words, than having anything to do with the architecture of the room. It's really not part of the architecture of the room.
Well, but it is, John, because that's the point at which whatever change there is in the room in color or texture occurs. And now you're asking to raise that picture rail, which changes the angle of the coffer, which then influences the quality of light in the space, and the ductwork has to be examined.
The problem of moving the ductwork, or is it that the quality of the light is differs?
It's everything.
Problem is you don't like this flat angle here?
It doesn't
Yes.
work. It doesn't work that flat.
What doesn't work?
Oh, that's first of all, it's gonna be dark. I mean, that whole space will, and you won't get the proper lighting.
Let us
And
leave it
it doesn't,
open
John,
whether
that
the
doesn't work.
difference
You
of
can't even
this
get the ducts in
angle.
there. I mean, you can't get the air conditioning unit.
That is another argument, and that may be true too, but
The lighting isn't right, the air conditioning doesn't work, and the spatial configuration is wrong for the space.
I mean, right. I take it that there's a problem.
But we can raise the slab and redesign the skylight and make it,
That's nuts. We don't want to do that.
Well,
We don't want to do that. We don't want to do this either. We want to solve the problem of the code in the simplest possible way.
Let's assume we're building it right now and solve it that way.
We really pushed this for a long time to have this meeting. Because
It's only a year.
it's some good progress.
Well, we'll just do it now.
Oftentimes, issues which you think are fixed and we can move on, get modified, and then you have to relook at more than just that particular situation. With so many people involved, it's difficult. These are all done?
These are done.
I think deep down is Richard's absolute need for control and his style and approach and whatever experiences have led him to this point to where he cannot accept the client actually as a full partner and a person that he is serving as opposed to the reverse where we're really serving him. And the fact that the client is very difficult and the client, the Getty is difficult, it is complicated, it's multi-headed. It's not as if Richard just has to work with the chairman of the board, and as long as the two of them see eyeball to eyeball, it's going to get done. He's got several masters to serve, so the process is very cumbersome, and I'm sure that's been extremely frustrating to Richard. You and I have had trouble with this all along, and that is that it's the problem of identifying priority public spaces and really being willing to set back staff spaces and work areas and lab areas into just a different level of quality. From the trustees' point of view, you've got to put the bucks on the public space. You and I have had trouble with this all along. And Dinwiddie tells me that your guys have gone through and upgraded all the specs again from where they were cut last time.
Yeah, but there has to be a certain level of quality that not only is for when it opens, but it's for 20 years later. Because to cut that, I'm worried about what it's like 20 years later or 25 years later.
It's telling us time for lunch,
Yeah, this side is very good. That's very good. Maybe you're getting too perfect.
Don't worry, we'll never achieve that problem.
That's a beautiful cut.
Yeah. I mean, for an inside corner, that'd be perfect.
It looks like Parmesan cheese.
I knew I liked Parmesan.
But you need a special diamond teeth for this kind of Parmesan.
Yes.
The couple of stones that I need to know your opinion about are in here.
Which ones?
No prompting.
I mean, are these from the same block? All these, or more? No? Different blocks?
This is a range. This would be a total range of the whole project.
Well, I think it's pretty good as a total range.
The stone is tens of millions of dollars in and of itself, and the leap of faith that the Getty's taking with Richard is the fact that there are many people within the trust anyway who feel pretty strongly that it's a mistake to go with just solid stone walls of one material. They feel that there needs to be some sort of banding or the introduction of some other material, different color, different texture, to break it up.
I think that's okay. It's crisp and yet it varies. I think that's fine. It looks like stone.
He's been adamant, fixed, determined about this from the start. And while we keep raising our concern about it, he seems very centered and solid in that conviction about the look and the feel of that building. What do you think of the bench?
It's too high. It's too high and it's not rough enough.
I don't think the top should be roughed over at all.
Yeah, but it's too polished. I like it a little rougher.
Yeah.
A little rougher.
This looks too artificial.
This you want smooth?
No.
No?
That's
Top's got to be smooth.
Not that
People
smooth.
will tear their pants on.
Yeah, let me look. Yeah, this is perfect, huh? These are terrific. Kids can, sit all around. They can have little lectures. Look at this. This is terrific. Come up here.
Yeah.
This is perfectly smooth.
The thing is, let me just offer this. I think a bench like this, I don't know, you feel that edge. We're gonna get sued. I'm not kidding
Come
you.
sit over here. Go
No,
sit
I
up
don't need
there.
to sit here. I can see.
You're not.
This is
What do
like
you
a
mean,
razor
sued?
blade. Come on. A 3-year-old kid comes up here. That's it.
Why?
Because they're gonna cut themselves.
Well, yeah, look, here. Just like this. You just do this to it. See this? That's what you...
Beautiful. I think it's great like that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
That's all you do. You take Steve, let me show you. Steve, come over here. It's like anything that's out of the...
The trouble is, we want to have benches that people want to sit on and feel comfortable. And where's our? Maybe I worry too much about people today. Not wanting to snag their nylons and things like
Okay,
that.
there's one. Don't mess them up.
We leave it exactly
that way. 42 pieces. Huh? Fantastic.
We have to charge at least $200,000 each because those are antiques.
No. They weren't antiques until today. Huh?
You're right.
Richard seems to almost have a kind of hostility toward comfort, Chairs are hard and uncomfortable. Women feel that the spaces are very masculine and hostile to women. And there is an increasing concern among the people within the Getty that Richard's interiors are too austere, too homogeneous, too much the same, too rigid. And it's just the whiteness and the sameness of it all. And the Getty is wanting more richness and diversity and quirkiness and fun and that sort of thing in the interiors. And that's tough to reconcile because his buildings, the exteriors and the interiors are really, to me, quite interrelated. And I have trouble separating the two and saying, we'll let Joe Smith do the interiors of these offices. But that's something that we're talking a lot about right now.
I guess I'm very lucky because little did I ever dream that I would be living on the site through the entire period of design and construction. But it's enabled me to really understand every inch of the site. I've walked every single inch that you see here, even through the woods and the trees and the steep embankments. And so I think I know this site probably better than any site I've ever worked on, but one needs to here because it's a magical site. Here, every place you look, it's different and it's dramatic. There's a drama to this place that is unlike any place that I've been before or built before. We're at a point in the Central Gardens where there will be a platform, a viewing platform, where the gardens will come down from
the entry area. You won't be able to see it through this mound. And then from here, people can stand and look out at the view from the ocean to the downtown area.
Since we've got the buildings under construction, it means the footprint is set. We're struggling a little with the space between the buildings, trying to define the outdoor spaces, which are the public spaces of the project. It's probably the outdoor spaces that are created by the buildings are very much as important as the buildings. Right now, there's an ongoing dialogue with real talents like Bob Irwin, a local artist that the Getty brought in, who is kind of schemed as an intervention into the Central Gardens as we've designed them.
There's one more to go over there.
He's been working with Richard for about 3 or 4 months, and Richard explained to him the key elements of the site planning so that as he develops his ideas, it's in concert with the ideas that we've been working on for some time. It would be a disaster for him just to take the site and say, now it's my turn, and just do his own thing.
The idea here is to kind of soften the gardens up, introduce water down the middle of that ravine, kind of inject more of the drama of the site as it was in its natural state. You'd have to have the original drawing going back to the design unveiling in '91 to remember that this was all a lot of hard surfaces and pavement, very formal, very sculpted. Harold Williams wanted the gardens to be more of an enriching aesthetic experience in their own right. Where there was something in the landscape more than just being pretty or restful or a kind of pleasant backdrop to the buildings. We wanted something that you would go after when you went into the gardens and that had a concept behind it. And so we took off down the different track, and we felt that a new voice, a new attitude, a new frame of reference would shake it up a little bit.
The thing that's been very nice for me is that I wasn't quite sure how the garden would really connect to the architecture. Having this strong geometry in this area being very much almost like a living room, really more. The architecture being the piece de resistance here, and that the garden should somehow be integrated to that and yet be a different experience. So that you really have the three. Come for the art, come for the architecture, and you also have a garden experience. So let me just drop this thing down. In developing this sort of landform here, one of the things I'm very interested in is that this whole thing now is almost like a spine and actually has a geometry to it. Every single thing here. I rather like this drawing because it shows that very strong geometry. I think this canyon element is a very strong element to tie this whole project together. When you've arrived down here, sort of main event that brings one down here is this pool. This here then is a kind of maze in which all the paths are actually water. So you can look down on this maze, sort of read the maze, but you can't walk on it. All of these are garden metaphors that have been repeated 1,000 times in gardens.
Now, that's very different than what we see here, right?
Well, it's not very different. I think the key difference is that I feel very strongly about keeping this canyon element here, a pretty strong element. I think it's gotten on the edge of not being really a canyon. So the biggest difference is this platform is 10 feet lower down than the other platform.
This is something we've locked heads on, and he has a hard head, I have a hard head, so we haven't found a solution.
And nobody's bloody yet?
Well, not yet, but in part, the garden is a path to a destination, and when you get to that destination, there has to be a reward, and that reward is another view of the ocean, of Santa Monica, of Wilshire, of San Diego, and of downtown, which is unlike any other view that one experiences on the project.
Richard, if you go down 10 feet then, where does your sightline stop?
The sightlines would stop right here at the tree.
Yeah, but what would that cut out of the lower part of the big view?
It would cut out your view of the ocean.
No, it's my turn to make my argument. I make the argument that the garden has essentially a responsibility to give you another kind of experience. Now, there is no other place in the entire situation where one goes down into a soft, somewhat closed, like an enveloping kind of space. The whole drama of this thing is to reintroduce the canyon. My point is that to move it up 10 feet is to essentially lose the critical elements of the garden and to sacrifice the garden to a view which exists in a lot of other places.
If it's really in the nature of this landscape scheme and integrated with the whole building scheme, it's in the nature of this scheme to lose the full view for a while.
It's not for a while.
And then come back up again. It's forever when you're down in there, right. But you come back out again.
When you come up again, you don't have the same view. You don't. It's totally different. It's an irresponsible act, in my view. That's how strongly I feel about it.
The interesting thing is that the one great view turned out to be where it turned out to be, which is our sticking problem. All the other views turned out to be just secondary views.
No, they're not secondary. But we have a public responsibility in the choice of this site. You don't, Richard. You're an artist. You can make a square grill.
And I'm totally irresponsible.
You can make a square grill.
And I'm totally irresponsible. My public responsibility.
It's not a question of one view. Go up to the site, spend a little time there.
I have gone up to the site, please.
Well, let me see if I got this right. The idea of this dropping more rather than less is so that you get the recall of the canyon. But it seems to me that the irony that occurs is that by pushing this down to make this more of a canyon recall, that in fact you lose the real canyon. And because the lower you are, the less you see that sense of that fall down to the sea, and that's where the primary power is. And I think that's the crux of the thing for me.
You want a response?
Yeah.
Bullshit.
On that note, we should end.
Well, we're not going to resolve it now, obviously.
Certain questions.
It's a complex.
It sounds like an executive decision. Here we go.
Out this window, you can see the site from many, many places in Los Angeles. You can see the site from a different perspective and in a different way. In the same way that you can see Los Angeles from the site in a different way. And for one person to say, you know, I want my object, I want my piece to be more important than the larger landscape of the city, to be more important than a perspective, a sense of this place, that my individual artwork is the controlling, determinant, makes me furious. Just makes me angry beyond belief.
Here you've got an artist posing a completely different scheme, something that an architect himself wouldn't ever think to dream up in his own project, which is an answer to it, which fits in with it, comments on it, but has its own life. I mean, personally, I think the notion of losing the big landscape view, in other words, descending and losing the broad view of Los Angeles beyond and the ocean for a while, then coming back and recovering it is okay. So my big take on the meeting was that this is a big leap forward. I love the scheme. Every part of it isn't resolved yet, but the basic idea, the sequence of experiences is wonderful. I think, I can't believe that this question of the level at the end isn't something that can't be resolved. It seems to be we had a struggle that Must have been at least partly symbolic, frankly.
I've never used stone before. And so to see it here finally on the site, on the wall, is I can't say gratifying, that's an understatement. It's fantastic. And when you see it in different times of the day and different lights, it's miraculous. And the scale is right, and the color is right, and the texture is right, and the workmanship is good. You know, here we're saying, hey, this is the way stone comes out of the quarry. There's some that are a little darker, there's some that are a little lighter. You know, that's fine. That's the nature of stone. That's the natural material. This is what comes out of the earth, and this is what we're using. You know, this wall is a contemporary wall, it's a modern wall, and it's a timeless wall. You know, it's somehow related to the history of architecture, and yet it's of our time. And that's a hard thing to do with stone.
We've already decided that that wall is stucco.
But the design still has this area as stone.
Which is complete bullshit. So this would all be stucco.
Yeah.
Under your scenario?
Well, to me, I'd make it all stucco.
The entrance floor is up there, and that's where you come off the plaza at that level. Then you'd walk indoors here and go down the aisle. Then the stage is up there, and there's the famous Richard Meyer window.
Oh.
He was sure we'd want light in here. Of course, he'd like it just like this, I think.
Right.
Richard has always felt strongly that the auditorium needed light. And the battle has always daylight, I mean, and the battle has been that, you know, we use this mainly for slides and projection, and the last thing you want is a big flood of daylight coming in across the stage. So we fought over that, and then we began to realize that what really concerned him more than anything was the facade on the other side, that wall out there looked too monolithic. And so there will be what looks like a window there when you look at it from the outside, but on this side, at least as long as Kurt and I are here, it's going to be walled over, and it won't, you know, you won't read it like a window.
So what's happened since we last saw you?
What's happened? Just, you know, slowly, the plan has just been slowly developing, and at one point it became a kind of independent project. So it had a life of its own. And the relationship with Richard Meyer, which was very adversarial, at the same time was productive. You would think that collaborations are of a particular character, I mean, very friendly and everybody working together and brainstorming. Turns out that's not necessarily so. I think, oddly enough, I think this probably worked out very well. I felt as long as the garden's getting better, it doesn't make any difference.
your first opportunity to present you, Robert Irwin. So on that note, Robert Irwin.
How do you do? One of the things that the Getty started out with is that they wanted a garden. And they talked about the importance of the garden and all the things that they wanted the garden to accomplish. The first thing that I realized is that it wasn't a big enough space. Okay? So the first thing I did was, in terms of this garden, was say, hey, this is not big enough. I've got to somehow capture this whole area here. So what I did was to take Meyer's bowl and reverse it. Just turned it around backwards. And you'll see, when you arrive down at this part in here, this pool is actually has a maze floating on the water, which is all azaleas. And they're going to be very carefully clipped and hedged. You know, have you ever seen a hedged maze? They're really quite fascinating in themselves. So I think it's going to look quite good. These are the drawings that kind of gives you just a visual walk through the garden. These are the steps from the upper plaza coming down. And when you arrive at this point here, this is what you're seeing. Then you start going down into the garden. This would be standing here looking down the stream, looking down the middle of underneath the bosque of trees. Kind of a mesmerizing sort of decompression chamber moving into the garden. Then it goes across the plaza here. This is looking down at that walk area in there. And then this is really looking down at the azalea pool here. That's kind of pretty much it. This is, as I said in the very beginning, an incredible opportunity. I'm hoping that I take full advantage of it. I may never get a chance to do something as eccentric or as clearly detailed as that is. Thank you.
Up here, because this building was the first one they started on with this metal panel system. The black part of the project is actually those components which form the weather-tight barrier on the project. That black is then covered with off-white metal panels. At one point, Richard considered stainless steel panels, but then the community insisted we paint them this off-white color. The metal panels are made in units in a factory and brought to the site, and there are something like 5,000 of them total on the project. But 4,000 of them are different from one another, so there's absolutely no repetition.
Oh, this is really the panel, and as you look through here, you see the backup wall. So this corner, the requirements for this corner to be exactly square were extreme. Part of it is the requirement that joints and systems align throughout the project. So you're going to see a consistent pattern, you know, that this line here may well line up with another part of the building 50 feet away.
In Richard's designs, the grid impacts every decision. Richard Meyer buildings are always designed around a square module. In our case, it is 30 inches. And all the stone is either 30 inches square or some multiple of that. So it actually almost gets to be a joke around the project, is that anytime you ask a question about dimension, you always can sort of figure it out yourself. You know it's more than 5 feet, but it's less than 10 feet, so it must be 7.5 feet.
It looks like a rough surface wall, but every one of these stones, before they're installed, is laid out. We snap lines, we tape out the control of each one of these stones so they land exactly. So everything here has to be precise. As rough as it looks, it's got to be on. It's got to be on perfect.
Richard Meyer's design philosophy requires an exactness to detail. That requires a lot of attention by the mechanics that are out here in the field. Richard is a perfectionist. That's how he's made his reputation, that's how he's earned it. And this is not a simple project.
In a way, it's odd that this is the last building to be topped out, because in reality, I think if you look back, this was the first one designed. I think the design for this building fell into place a little quicker than the others, partly because of the intense dialogue that we had with the director and his staff. This design then is not about a single facade. It's, there's no front, there's no back, and there's no sides to this building. It's really about what we're doing here today, and that is experiencing the place.
If I had my way, we would have all been able to put our name in the cement when the cement was still wet, but we couldn't do that. So we have a wall over here, it's a nice blank wall, and we have some big fat markers that we would like everybody who is here today to take a marker and sign your name so that you can say I was part of this whole process.
By the way, what this model doesn't show is that there's a picture rail and an air supply that's making a very distinct line all the way around, and the line jumps and goes across here, right? But it stops here, so you're not giving us that. And the question for David is, how likely are there pictures in the collection that you'd be likely to hang in this small room that are so high that this would be a handicap for your room?
It depends how you feel, but maybe we accept reality that we're holding up the project, but in the Continental Tool...
I'm sorry, that you don't have to concede. I'm sorry, but it's a question of whether you or your successor have a reasonable chance of needing that extra wall height in these rooms. That's the only issue. It can be redone. Right. Okay.
Well, we'll have to live with the consequences. Which will be considerable.
So you'll have to revisit it in about 5 years.
Yeah, you know, the dates are changing, they'll just change longer.
What it is, I think, in terms of narrowing the direction, if we end up, we say, this last gallery here is going to be with a strong red velvet. This type of velvet, that is a flat one with no moire or texture to it. In terms of floor material, all those rooms are with wood floor, and I'm not sure to what extent those two should not have carpet.
The feeling of these rooms would change dramatically if we carpeted these photo galleries, and that's so much an expectation of galleries where works of art and paper are shown that we were asking ourselves just now whether carpet makes sense. It introduces a new material.
It should read together. I think it will cut the cluster in half to change that floor material in a way that would be unfortunate.
I find it functionally nice and not disturbing. I still like it. I still like it a lot.
You know, after years of this kind of tension and silence between Richard and John over the quality of the galleries, the finishes in the galleries, the feel and the look of those galleries, it was clear they just couldn't come together. And so we went and got Terry Despont, who is an architect and designer from New York, to come in and take leadership over that part of the project to bring closure on the decisions about the finishes.
It's beautiful.
Get the carpet off the, yeah, get the carpet off the floor there.
Oh, this gives them that shape. First, I disagree with you in photograph. Go in the photograph gallery. It's much nicer to have carpet.
I have that. It looks awful.
Oh, and inserted with 2'6" of wood board.
Yeah, at least that helps.
Yeah. Put wood and a carpet on top.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. I think that's better. But so they can take it out. Let's do that. Let's do that. They have both. That's a good idea. I like that. We've already bought the wood.
And the carpet too. There was a dichotomy between the fact that Richard was designing the building and clearly it would have been absurd to say inside the Richard Meyer building we know are going to put molding and plaster cornices and things like that. I felt very strongly that could not and should not be the case. And I remember John asking me initially, you know, Thierry, we would like you to come and help us to see if we could not have cornices and chair rail and molding. And I think part of my first design effort was in fact to try to bring John more saying, well, listen, you can't and you should not, because what is important is to create the modénature, that is the rhythm that comes from a base and a molding, and there is a notion of proportion. So that was that. That being said, I thought I was completely moving into Richard territory, and yet Richard was still already saying, well, why do we need a base, and why do we need even a smaller stream at the ceiling?
This is an area of outdoor dining, so you know it's sort of a place where people will come and say, "Oh, remember that place under the trees with that big stone, and that nice bench."
The interior that looks nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. It's much crisper than it would have been.
Nice hard edge.
The cube would not have read properly around it. But we probably should go over to the other.
Yeah, there's a meeting starting at 12. This will give you a nice view of the lower garden. Is this the finished wall?
That's Cortown. That's it.
That's the wall?
That's it. Unbelievable.
I'll tell you what I miss right here
is that
there's a line, the line that draws that facade back over into this orientation. There's a line missing. There's a piece of the planimetric missing here.
What a disaster.
You come around the garden like this, and then you come down a zigzag bridges into the lower part of the garden here. There's a terrace garden in here, which is going to be the perennial garden. And then this, of course, is the pool. And this is, they're beginning to lay out the azalea rings right now. There's two things I know now. One is that the scale is good, that you can see that it holds its own. This is a big project and big site. And the second is actually to be up on that bridge, which we can't go up on right now. But right here, this is what I call the power site. I mean, you know, that there is always a place, or oftentimes a place in the world that really suddenly resonates, has that power. If you stand here and look at this situation, the way the architecture wraps around it right here, this is like the umbilical cord. You're holding the thing by the short hairs right here in a way, you know. And it's not just a view of the garden, it's a view of the whole project. And so the whole argument about looking that way, which is terrific, but really looking this way is even more powerful.
Now, what happens now?
Okay, well,
What we have here is we have the key to the floor that you should probably have for you. Thank you. Have a great first day at Getty Center.
Good morning.
Pretty terrific, huh?
Hi, Mr. Williams. What do you think?
It looks great.
It's
terrific.
Beautiful.
That's terrific.
You know, we were here one afternoon, Richard and I were here, and people coming out of the building were just without any prompting or any need to do so. We're stopping Richard and kind of grabbing him and saying, you know, how wonderful it is and how much they enjoy being in their spaces. And these are people that have been pretty skeptical of the whole thing, you know, and I think the architecture is just fantastic. He and I walked the building on last week, that building, and it was just hysterical because he went around to the offices and he would see everybody had all their little tchotchkes and their family pictures and their funny little things and stuff, you know, pinned to the board, and he said, you know, you can't allow this. You have to put out a memo. You can't allow this. One woman had a lamp like mine, and she had little koala bears, you know, kind of shimmying up the lamp. And he said, this is disgusting. You can't allow this. I said, Richard, you know, it's their home. You know, you have to let it go. This is where they live now.
Hi, how are you? Do you have someone to line up the chairs and the tables and to keep them straight rather than have them skewed all over the place? Huh?
No one is sorry for my...
I mean, you know, it just looks very chaotic the way it is. And it would be nice to have them all lined up and straight in both directions. Maybe we should give you a plan to show you where. Nice. Yeah, why don't we send them a plan so they know how to keep it? And
yeah.
Good. Thank you. No one tells them anything, you know?
That large stone there is the headstone that goes up at the top, this big black stone. Yeah, that sits at the top. The water emerges out from under there. Some of the things that we've done are turning out really very, very beautiful. I think it's going to be a successful garden, but it's going to set new precedents for what it's all good garden.
Yeah, that's right.
What we have now is basically a sculpture in the form of a garden, aspiring to be art. Okay?
Is that the last one or not? That's the last one. And then we have a gap here.
The way the buildings and the landscape looks in this light, I found it exhilarating. There's a certain kind of layering of space that you get with the column, the wall, the transparent plane of the dining space looking through and then out to the mountains. And it's kind of a sequence of spaces which are defined by the architecture, which frame views, and views in every direction. Wherever you look, there's a different view that's framed by the buildings. And it's different than when it's sort of a panoramic view without any reference. What I discover is the way the light is, which you know about, but it's always better in reality.
This is a good room. It is. It's the best part of it. And space really works. Why was this not a struggle? This one was easy.
Different personalities.
I see.
better view out here. It makes this fairly open.
We've had years of looking at drawings and years of looking at models, but we just weren't seeing all the vantage points, all the views, nothing like it. We weren't seeing all the places where elements come together. And, obviously, we were only seeing the museum for the most part. We were spectators of the development of the other parts of the project and couldn't easily visualize what Richard was up to in many of those areas. And now that it comes together, it's pretty amazing. It's very rich and very complex.
Of course, we understood that the orientation of the building was extremely important to Richard and was sort of bedrock of the building project. But now we, I think, or at least I, begin to understand what he obviously was envisioning from the start and the kinds of views that you would get. In terms of working on the interiors of the galleries, we were probably as obsessive about the museum interiors as he was. We may not have always agreed, but I think we were worked together obsessing over details.
It was true. It was like two kind of rival armies coming together.
I thought everybody liked this one the last time.
We haven't done badly mocking up the pictures,
The pictures look terrific. This is, I guess, like a long marriage. What's interesting is that you always think you can change the other person a little bit. And the other person always thinks they can change you a little bit. And it's a question of who's going to change the other, and if in the end, either is going to change. With John, I always thought, somehow during the process, I would be able to convince him to maybe be less conservative in his approach to the museum galleries than he seemed to be when we began. And I think that he thought he was going to convince me to be more conservative in my approach than I had been.
I mean, the truth is, we changed each other a little bit. I think Richard saw the logic very often of what we were proposing. I don't think he would ever have made it part of his own buildings for other clientele, but I think he understood it was a necessity for what we wanted. We moved a long way towards him. We've done things, we've accepted things in his building, and I think rightly that were surprises to us that worked out better than we thought.
So if you just haul away, and then I'll tell you when to stop.
Yeah.
Not as high that end, Jeff. Down, down. Yeah. Okay, tie it off. Well, isn't that something?
Well, you talk about great days. nobody has a greater one than me. This is, I guess it's 13 and a half years since we started this project. I'm not going to give you a long history, but it's just wonderful to be here. So enjoy it, and thank you all for being here and all you've done.
When you see it all come together, you realize that the years of work and the years of struggle have been worthwhile. You know, when we do this on paper, we know it's going to be there, but when you see it in reality, it gives me great pleasure. You say, hey, that works. I say, you know, I'm happy to be here. You know, I don't want to leave. I'm happy here. I'd like to keep working on it.
It's a mix of everything. I do feel, my God, it's done. But on the other hand, it is so beautiful, and there's so many wonderful vistas and all, and so many really delightful, you might say, surprises built into the architecture. I think it's just terrific, and I think the collaborative process really was very much worth it. I think we all feel the end result justified it all.
I think the biggest excitement for me is what a terrific public place this is. We kind of created a stage here for the Getty to become what it aspires to become.
I love the fact that we're sitting up on a hill. We can be seen by hundreds of thousands of people every day. We'll be in the curiosity of zillions of people. They'll come here. When they come here, I don't care what the motive is. That motive may be just to get a better view of the city. Fine. To get it, they'll have to come through the galleries. And something's going to rub off.